Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty. It's healing. It's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glen Nunes.
Welcome to Cracked Open with Glen Nunes. I'm your host today, and this is where we dive deep into life's hardest emotions and discover the beauty that can come from being broken open. Episode 5 of this series is what we're going to discuss today. Is an important topic, anger. Anger is a word that can make people flinch or defend themselves before a conversation even begins. But anger is not an enemy. It's a signal. It's your soul saying something isn't right. And for years, I thought anger was something to bury, to ignore, to hide. But when you bury anger, it doesn't lie, it festers, and it becomes bitterness, resentment, and pain that leaks out onto the people that you love the most. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not anger as an emotion, but anger as an energy. The kind that can destroy you, or if you learn how to harness it, the kind that can build you into something stronger. Okay, so anger, we all know it. We've all felt it, and most of us have let it take control of us at some point. But anger, like grief, is something we don't talk about enough. We try to hide it, suppress it, or justify it until it becomes, something that owns us. So anger is one of the most powerful emotions we experience. And when it's not managed, it can destroy relationships, ruin opportunities, or steal years and years of peace from your life. So I've lived it. I've been holding it in. I've been, I've seen what holding it in can do to you and how it festers inside. It builds pressure and one day explodes, So what I'm going to get into this, other personal things I've been through later, because in these podcasts, like I say, they're raw, and I speak from emotion, and I don't edit them as of right now. I just come out here and I have some notes. I keep some notes, and I usually tell you when I'm going to be reading some notes. But I'm going to be talking about my personal life here and there, stuff that I witness. I do a lot of research on these, but I also like to talk about my personal experiences, because it's reality, and it's something I don't have to read. I've witnessed it, and so it's nice to be able to express yourself and know that you've lived it, and you know what you're talking about because you've been there before. So I've lived with anger most of my whole life, whether I realize it or not. I built this bubble like around myself after losing so much. I lost my, I've been in some issues. I lost my parents, my mom and my dad. I lost my brother. He was like my best friend. I lost little Rogan. I've talked about that before, my grandson. And recently, I just buried my granddaughter, Brielle, just 16 years old. And, that kind of grief hardens you. You stop, trusting, you stop forgiving. But where I'm at right now, it was in a different spot than when Rogan passed away, and then when Brielle passed away. So I've grown a lot as a man and a human being, and I'm going to explain that in a little while. So in this bubble that I talk about, I actually wrote a song, and I haven't put these songs out there, some originals. I call it a bubble, and I talk about how I started to hold everything in, the hurt, the betrayal, the years that I'll never get back, and like, even, I've lost so many things because of anger. And I'll get into this about something with me and my daughter, and actually I can link Brielle to it. Even though I'm in a good place now, but most of her life I wasn't. I had a lot of anger built up, and she has nothing to do with this, but I'll explain what I'm talking about later. But it, just pain. I'm going to talk about pain that never got resolved. So when you live negative because of life, when stress and disappointment become your lens, and you just stop seeing how many good people there actually are out there in the world. But when tragedy hits, you see them everywhere. You start to really think about things. The community steps up, friends show up, people give their hearts, And then you realize how much love is still out there, even in a broken world. But when you let the anger, you hold all this anger and you don't see it, but until something happens, you then you realize what life is really about. So I've been, like I said, I've been carrying anger. I was carrying anger around for decades, and it's like that, the bubbles growing inside you, layer by layer. You're losing people you love, losing time, losing control. The bubble started with my mom, my dad, my brother, like as I said, and it just keep growing. I just kept holding this stuff in. Um, like I said, when Rogan passed away, my marriage fell apart, and I think I've talked about how that fell apart, and the anger that you just hold in. Me, I hold it in, and I wouldn't really talk about it much. I'm a very private person, and I kind of am talking about it a lot now, and I wish I would have done this longer, because I mean a lot longer ago, but this actually was affected my personal relationship with my one true love. I mean, and it had a lot to do with that, and I'll talk about that later. But um, you know, let me kind of go into like the protection mode, I guess I can call it. So, anger can be like a protection mode too. Sometimes anger shows up to stop us from being hurt again, to protect us from pain. In that sense, it can even be helpful for a moment. It stops the bleeding, it forces distance. But when we don't let it go and we hold on after the danger is past, that same protection, can becomes like a poison. What once kept us safe starts eating us alive. And that's the part of us that we never deal with. We keep that armor on like way too long after the battle's over. I guess that's a good way to put it. So when I had to walk out of a home that I raised my kids in, every one of these moments, just added to the bubble. And I never released it. The bubble became toxic. It just sits there, and it sits there under the surface, until someone, usually the wrong person, pays the price. That's what happened with, like, my one true love too. We had this one stupid big fight, that one moment of rage that I let everything boil over. Years of pain, betrayal, and hurt, came out in minutes, literally minutes, and from holding this crap in, and I said things I didn't mean. I became someone I never wanted to be, and that's what anger does. It turns you into who you swore you'd never become. And it just, if you don't pay attention to it and catch it, it could destroy a lot of things. So, um, you know, I've I've seen anger destroy, like, many families, and I can talk about, like I said, my personal stuff. I had an uncle, and he's passed away, but my uncle, he his daughter got pregnant, and she had a baby with someone he didn't approve of. He just didn't approve of it. He would say terrible things. He would say, "That's not my grandchild." I mean, crazy things. And he missed decades. I mean, decades of their lives: birthdays, holidays, first steps, graduation, all this stuff. And by the time he finally did make peace, and by the time he made peace, so much life had passed away that he could never get back. And it's really sad, because in the end, you know before he passed away, he did make peace, but it was like he lost a lot of years. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit later, about with me and my daughter. But anger, it'll rob you blind of time, of peace, love, and connection. And once that time's gone, you don't get it back. When time's gone, it's gone. I got a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. Talk to him every day, and his mom is like a mom, a second mom to. I love her, and like I said, I won't mention names. I don't like to do that, unless I'm sitting in the studio with somebody, and we'll be doing some of those podcasts later. But she said to him, you know, tomorrow's never promised. Because she asked him to do something once. He said, "I'll do it tomorrow." And she always says this to him: "Tomorrow's never promised. Don't ever put anything off until tomorrow if you can do it today, because you never know." And that hit me when he told me this. I'm like, she's so right. You know, because anger, what does it do? It loves to make us wait, doesn't it? To wait to apologize, to wait to forgive, to wait to say I love you. And sometimes the wait turns into never. This anger, it's just terrible. And you just let things go. You don't be angry at yourself. I was angry at myself for years, and I'm actually living with that right now. I beat myself up every day for things I did. A few months ago, some stuff happened, and I got to live with it every day. And I say to myself, why did I do that? Like, why? And I beat myself up, and um, I stopped blaming myself for everything. I was the cause of this, and even though people do things to me, um, I blame myself, and even if they're wrong, it's like I take it out on myself. I beat myself up. I'm trying not to do that. I still do it, and it's just very hard to live with. I'm hoping that, you know, I'm forgiven, and I am, and I'm trying to forgive myself, but I have to live with it, forever. And I hope, the things I've done. I hope that, um, you know, I just hope that, how can I say this? I just hope that I can forgive myself, which I have. I'm finally starting to love myself for the first time in decades. And yeah, I ask God I always go to God because I talk about him on my podcast. Number one is God in my life, and everything is second after that. But I always ask him for forgiveness first, and he'll always forgive. Then I have to forgive myself, and then, and then you ask people for forgiveness, and hopefully, they're in a position where they can forgive you and believe you in their heart and let things go. But, you know, the cycle, the psychology of anger is kind of crazy. Anger is like what psychologists call like a secondary emotion. It's not what you feel first. It's what you feel after something else. Underneath anger is usually hurt, fear, rejection, shame, and but anger just it just feels safer, stronger, and more powerful. But it's really just a mask. And when you let that mask stay on too long, it becomes your identity, and that's why so many people feel stuck. Like I wrote another song called "The Man That They Didn't Know." There's so many people I know that would think of me I was this angry man or this mean guy or whatever, and I'm really not. Inside I'm a really teddy bear that people really know me, but I would hold this anger in for these years, and I just didn't have patience for people, and I just didn't want to deal with it, and I would say things not mean to be mean, but I didn't realize I had to apologize to a lot of people for this. I have reconciled with a ton of people because I didn't realize, I just like didn't want to be bothered, and it's kind of being hypocritical because I love people. I want to treat people as I want to be them to treat me. I want people to treat me as you want yourself to be treated as you treat others. And the thing is I wasn't doing that. I was like being somebody I wasn't, and I was like, I wouldn't want them to do this to me. It just popped in my head, and I thank God that I'm kind of getting over that, and I'm a changed man, and there's so many things I've changed about myself. But like I said, it comes your identity, and you don't want that, and you don't want to be labeled as that, and you want people to really know who you are. So I think about like this night I was talking about, that I had a terrible night a few months ago, and I was yelling, and I actually, my father was a very abusive, a verbally abusive man to my mom my whole life. And I watched this. I've talked about this in my other podcast. Watched it for years, and I always said I wouldn't never be like that and treat women like that or treat anybody like that. And my brother kind of fell in his footsteps, but I would never do that. And then for the first time in my life, I caught myself, you know, like for a couple of minutes, I, kind of turned into my father, and it was, and he was a good man, but when he was doing that, he wasn't. And I was like, oof, I just realized I was just carrying generations of unhealed anger, and I was him for a second, and in that moment, and that's not good, you know. So I went to I was in this group once in this church I was in years ago, and I love this church, and that I was involved in. And we had it was a men's group. I'm trying to think. Oh, men's ministry it was called, and it was teaching you how to publicly speak and how to do sermons and all this. But it was also about life's issues, and we would talk about one person would have to get up there, and every week or whatever we did these, and just bring up a topic and talk about it and see how you could, you add notes to your thing, and you go up there and you just try to put something together. And my pastor, his name was Dennis, and I love this man. I miss him dearly. He moved to California, so I mean I lost touch with him when he moved after a while, but it was his turn. He was also one of the guys in this group, and it was his turn. He said he went up to the table and at the podium where we used to stand. And he said, "Today my topic is rage." And I was like, "Oh." I wasn't expecting because this guy was the nicest guy I ever met. His wife was a sweetheart. Um, I just loved her. She was a sweet person, and he was just so soft spoken. He was just a great guy. And he said, "I want to talk about rage." And he explained how like when you don't realize when as a man around children and women, when you get raise your voice or you get loud, you don't realize you actually scare them, and it's different than like a man just you get in a rage and you're ready to fight and nothing scares you. You know what I mean? But you don't realize what you're doing to especially like a woman or a child. And I want to talk about his his story. So he told us the story, and he goes, "I'm going to give you an example how rage can take if you're not in control and you lose your temper. This is what can happen and can turn into something bad." He was at a stoplight, and these young kids were next to him in the car, and the windows were all down, and he was with his wife, and they were swearing and just and they looked at him. They said something cocky, and they were just saying filthy things, I guess. And he got really upset, and he said, watch your tongue or whatever. He said something, and one of them got loud with him. And Dennis said he opened his door, and his wife was so scared for her life. There was like 4 or 5 young kids in the car, and he ran up to the kid. I don't know if he said it was the passenger seat or the driver, and he leaned in the window and grabbed him by his shirt and like screamed at him and said, "Don't you talk to him like me like that. You better respect it." And he was the pastor, and he flipped out and he grabbed the kid and he said, "I was yelling." And the kid was so scared they sped off. And he goes, "I went back to the car," and he was like so mad, and he didn't realize how much fear he had put into his wife. She was scared for their lives. And he said, "For that moment, I didn't realize I was in a fit of rage for that moment." And he said, "You got to catch yourself." And then he went on to talk about rage. So I'm talking about anger, which is kind of a form of rage, but leads up to rage is like you don't want to get to rage. I've been there too. I'll talk about a couple of things I did later, but for men especially though, with the anger, it's often like it's often the emotion that we reach for first because we don't always process pain or sadness like the way women do. It's simple just to get angry, and then it's simpler than just to show you're hurt. Like you're really hurt. It's easy to get angry, you know. So like I said it before. Anger can be like a protection mode too. Sometimes the anger, you know, the anger shows up, to stop us from being hurt again, pretty much. To protect us from the pain in that sense. It can but it can be helpful. Like I said earlier, it stops the bleeding, it forces distance, you know. So it can be, as long as you don't let it take control of you, is what I'm saying. So, um, like I was saying before, like with my dad, and he was verbally abusive, and I saw that, and then in that moment, with my forever, I did the same thing, and for a few minutes I turned into him, but that was my breaking point. That was the moment I realized I was carrying this anger, and it was probably anger didn't even belong to me, just holding stuff in. It was crazy, but I started, I don't know. I just like I said, my uncle and all this stuff that as a child you witnessed this, but um, this woman came up to me. I've said this in my podcast when I did about forgiveness. I had a woman come up to me and she was angry, like with her son, really bad. I guess over the years, I didn't know this woman. She walked up to me and said that she was listening to my podcast, and she thanked me and she said it was very helpful. And she said, "I listened to the one on anger." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "I haven't talked to my son in 15 years. I talked about this in the forgiveness one. And I'm going to go talk to him tomorrow. It's time. I'm going to let the anger go." And I was like, wow, 15 years lost with her son. Those of you who have sons or daughters, think about not getting in a whatever the reason is, and you don't talk to your son for 15 years. It's a long time. But that's what anger does. It steals the time that you can never get back, like as I said earlier. So, um, I've also learned that, anger isn't, aimed outward. Sometimes it turns inward, when, Brielle passed away, I was angry at myself. I was really angry at myself because I had, I held her in her arms when she was born and all that, and then I had a falling out with my daughter over something, and so I lost many many years of of Brielle that I could have spent with her. And then I actually reconciled with my daughter. And then shortly after that, this happened to Brielle. So I was angry at myself for losing all those years. I beat myself up, I beat myself up for that really bad. But, um, you know, that kind of anger doesn't just come out yelling. It just eats you quietly every day. But I've learned to forgive myself. I'm not letting that anger eat me alive anymore. I'm really not. I can't change the past. But I can change the way I carry it, and I can change the future. So that's the healing part, learning to stop, fighting yourself, because that's what we do. We seem like to fight ourselves, anger doesn't, just break hearts, it breaks your body, you know, doctors have proven that chronic anger leads to heart disease, digestive issues, sleep loss, depression. It floods your system with stress hormones until your body forgets how to rest. That's why forgiveness isn't just spiritual; it's physical. Poor health feeds anger too. Lack of sleep, bad diet, pain, stress, hormonal imbalance. Like I said, anger. You know, um, health and stress from a toxic loop. So if you want peace in your heart, you got to take care of your body too. You got to get rest, eat better, breathe, exercise, and this will help you the healthier you are. And believe it or not, that I mean, this is I'm got this off the internet. It will actually help you with if you have anger issues and stuff. You got to take care of your body. Poor physical or mental health you know can cause a worsen anger. It's while chronic anger harms physical and mental well-being by increasing, like I said, the stress hormones. It damages the heart and depression. Like I said, it interferes with your sleep. You know, um, it's just that the mental health conditions can increase the anger, and the lifestyle factors like poor sleep and diet can make it worse. You gotta pay attention to that and try to take care of yourself. God says that our bodies is our temple, man. Take care of it. So, um, just managing anger means taking care of your whole self, man, your mind, your body, and your spirit. So some people when they feel angry, they look for quick fixes to numb it. And they say, I just need a drink. I had a bad day, whatever. And they turn to alcohol or something else, just to take the edge off. And we've all heard this and probably done it. And the truth is that that doesn't really solve anything. It just puts a blanket over the fire and that's still burning underneath. So you might feel calm for a bit, but when it wears off, the same thoughts come rushing back, you know, usually stronger. That's why people end up angrier the next day, not better. The only way to deal with anger is to face it, not drown it. You breathe through it, you talk it out, you pray through it. I always go to prayer. I always say that's my number one thing. I was talking to my friend today about how I always go to prayer. I was helping him with something, and we had a nice discussion today. I said, I don't know where you are in your prayer life, but it helps me, and without it, I don't know where I'd be. But um, you can write about your anger problem, like journal, like because alcohol doesn't erase the problem; it just delays the healing. You know, so just think of that. I heard this analogy. I was online and in this analogy, this guy was talking about anger, and it kind of stuck with me. He said, if you get, I can't remember how he said it, something like if you get bitten by a snake, it's not the bite that kills you, it's the venom. He said, so someone betrays you or lies to you or cheats on you or whatever, the act has already happened. You can't undo it. So if you're sitting there replaying it, letting it fester, and the venom spreads. Anger is that venom, and the only way to survive is to get it out right before it poisons your life. So it's the same thing. He used like a snake and a venom to you don't just sit there and look at the snake and say, you're a bad snake. You bit me and blah blah blah. You no, because you that's what the anger is. You get the anger out of you. You get that venom out of you, and if you want to live, help. That's the analogy. So like you hold on to the anger, you're not punishing them. You're poisoning yourself. You're holding on to the venom instead of releasing it. That's kind of what the analogy was. It was pretty interesting. Um, so that's why, it's also, you can set parameters. It's very important, before you make a decision when you're angry. Some people, I read all this. Some people, let me grab my notes here. Some of them, they say, I'm not going to react for 12 hours. They actually do. People do this. Some people journal, like I said, they write it out and they feel bad. Oh, me, I go for the praying or I go for a walk. But when you make a decision out of anger, you can't, you can't always undo it. So it's like, it's like making a decision. Like you say you were on drugs and you're all drugged up, and you make this stupid decision or whatever because your brain's cloudy or you're not paying, you're not you're not in the right place. But when you come down, you realize, your mind wasn't clear, and then that regret, it's a whole different kind of pain. Anger compounds regret. It makes it makes it deeper, heavier, and sometimes it's irreversible. If it, it regret like it's regret compound in depth. I was talking to someone today, and that's kind of what they said to me about that issue. They said, regret is, anger is regret compound in depth. I was like, wow. So, um, So, this was some interesting findings that I want to share with you. Let me grab my notes here. So this was like talking, and some of these I don't know how to pronounce some of these. These words I'm gonna try because I'm not the brightest bulb on the planet. But science and brain activation. This is a topic I found. So it says when anger turns into aggression, it activates and I'm not saying if I'm saying this right, amy amygdala. I don't know how to say. I don't know how to say this. I'm kind of ignorant to some things, but the emotional center in your brain, that part of it, it's the emotional center in your brain. So when anger turns into aggression, it activates the amygdala. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's the emotional center in your brain that handles fear, you know, threat responses, etc., things like that. Also because of that, when you're angry, our thinking and logic suffer. It makes it harder to make good decisions. So, and another one's like effective versus ineffective anger tools. This is stuff I found online. A meta-analytic review of many studies found that the arousal decreasing activities like deep breathing, meditation, calm reflection, and are more effective at reducing anger than venting or more physical high arousal activities like punching or running, in many settings. It's not about it's not about fighting stronger or harder. It's about learning how to lower the heat inside you before things boil over. So like, maybe hit a punching bag. That's what this is saying. Or maybe go running. Or some people breathe. They count. They count. They meditate. There's a a proven thing out there when you I'm not hyperventilating, but when you breathe in for 4 seconds and you hold it for six and then you breathe out slowly, like there's this thing and you do that a few times in a row. I've read that before. you know um they say it works, and these are all things that I've found on the internet. Is another one. Anger's dual nature. This is what the title of this research says. Anger isn't always bad. It can motivate you to stand up for yourself or pursue change, but it's how you use it, not whether you feel it. Anger is a tool. When misused, it breaks you, but when understood, it can point you toward what you truly care about. It's interesting, isn't it? So, spiritual support. This is another thing I found out there. Be angry, and but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. That's Ephesians 4:26-27. That's from the Bible. Like I do quote scriptures, and some people have told me they love when I quote scriptures. It puts them in Bible studies. I had a lady tell me that. Listen to a lot of the scriptures. I wrote them down, I went on this rabbit. She used my word, rabbit hole. Okay, so anyway, a soft answer. This is another scripture. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh words stir up anger. That's Proverbs 15:1. Um, so exactly as I said earlier, though, science even shows that when we act from raw anger, amygdala, the brain's emotional center, hijacks our thinking. Decisions get cloudy, and that's why learning to lower the heat inside of us is so vital. Studies, like I said, before, the studies that show like breathing, the meditation, maybe the punching bag if that's what you want, the physical one. Um, it's not about, it's really not about losing your mind. It's about, regaining it, kind of. So the Bible also says, Where was the other? I had another scripture. I don't know what I did with it. I can't remember. I couldn't find it in my. I thought I wrote another scripture down here, but as I said though, Ephesians 4:26-27. Be angry. Do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger. It's that's not about like suppressing your feelings. It's about not letting them wreck you. That's what that scripture I got out of that. But um, and the Bible, it also says a lot about anger. It all comes back to control, like Ephesians 4:26. I just read that to you. And then here's another Proverbs. This I found it. A fool vents all his feelings, but a wise man holds them back. That's Proverbs 29:11. And then here's one. Search my heart, O God, and know my thoughts. Psalms 139. It's like you know search my heart, God. Like don't if you read that, you ask and you tell him to know my thoughts. You don't want him to know that you're think that you're angry and crazy. You want him to you want a pure heart. So my 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 uh, my forever that I talk about sometimes on here, she used to always say to me, I don't want to go to bed angry. You never know it's the last thing you're going to say to someone. And she's absolutely right. I learned a lot from about that, and that's, there are people right now living with regret, because the last conversations with someone they loved, that was filled with anger, you know, you know, I know so many people have said, that have lived with the last thing they said to their loved one was not good, and they're like, "That's the last thing I said." And I mean, you probably know people that have said this. It can really, really set you back. So, humility can, can heal things that, pride, never would. So, you know, anger always says I'm right. Love says it's okay to be wrong if it means we can still hold each other. So you get, think of that, you know, it's okay to be wrong if it means we can still hold each other. That's what love says. And anger says, I'm right. So there's the difference of love and anger. So, um, I'm going to give you a couple of, um, practical strategies here another thing I get my notes I pulled off the internet. When you feel the anger is rising, you recognize, you reflect, you respond, and don't react instantly. Okay? Recognize, reflect, respond. Do not react instantly. Breathe. Take a pause. 10 seconds can save your peace. 10 seconds. I'm going to tell you about a couple instances. I wish I would have done this. Um, um, use I statements. Say how you feel instead of attacking someone else. Find outlets. Like I said, exercise, write, play music, pray, move the energy somewhere productive. Communicate. Even hard conversations can get you off the ledge. Silence builds explosions. It really does. Let go of let go of being right. You don't have to be right all the time. Some fights aren't even worth winning. Like sometimes when you do something, you get in these fights, you go, why are we even talking about this? Like this is what we're fighting. Actually, it's crazy. Like a fight that really made a really tough thing in my life, like the war turned into one of the worst things ever happened in my life. It was a fight that shouldn't even happen. It's crazy. Anger is energy. Just learn to use it. If you just learn to use it to feel purpose, not pain. And I guess that's the best way I can put it. So, um, so I just want to say something too about, like I said, I'm going to talk about some issues. I've made bad decisions. There was one incident that, I jumped the gun. I if I didn't think, and I went and did something really stupid, and I could have gotten a lot of trouble. I could have caused a lot of problems. I could have, hurt somebody or them hurt me, and it just was a foolish, foolish, foolish thing I did, and I was really angry, and I felt angry. You know, I don't know. I didn't. I let it take control of me instead of like all I had to do is a couple of things, like think about what I was doing, and I could have called a couple of my friends. They were, like I said, they used that word before. They would took me off the ledge, and um, I don't know, like you shouldn't let anger win, you know. like that the night I'm talking about, I did something stupid, you can be angry, but don't let it, make your decision for you, because all I would have had to do is call a couple of my boys that would have helped me, like I said, took me off that ledge, and in the morning, you know, the decision would have been a lot better to deal with than and the help in my situation. The one I chose out of anger, was not smart. And in the end, when I think about both of them, if I would have called my friends or took some time, I could have been, I would have, it would have been, I could have been smart enough in the morning to say, which scenario would have been better to help me improve my situation that I was trying to prove or get, and I'm not going to get into the reason. Um, you might be able to figure it out, but it was something I did, and I was trying to, I think I was doing it out of, but it was really stupid. And that night was really done. But then I'll give you an example though. There was another night that a similar situation happened, and I could have turned this anger. This just happened recently. I could have turned this anger into something really bad and jumped the gun. Instead, I didn't. I took a deep breath. I actually wrote a note instead, you know, and I stopped and I thought about it. I really did. And I just, you know, I don't know. I just, I felt that I was right in that moment, and I wrote a little note, and I left. And I'm like, in the morning, I said, yeah, the note was a lot better decision than what I did last couple of weeks. I mean, a couple of weeks ago. So, it kind of, it's working. I learn. You have to learn from your mistakes, and anger is terrible. So if you can, you know, try to fix it ahead of time, because anger can get, it can destroy. You know, But if you let it, anger can, like I said, anger can also teach. It can teach you where your limits are. It can teach you how to forgive. It can even teach you, you know, it can even teach you how strong you really are. I've learned that, losing control is weakness. It's actually weakness. There's nothing good about it, but learning to hold peace is power, because anger, when harnessed, becomes drive, drive to heal, drive to rebuild, drive to become, who you were meant to be, so you got to think of this study this thing, go do some online. There's so much stuff on anger. It's unbelievable. A lot of people say the same thing, but you can find some really good stuff on anger. Because anger isn't like a natural emotion, but if we don't deal with it, it controls us. I said that earlier when I started in the podcast today. It can ruin our relationships, damage our health, and it can block our blessings. It really can. Like, anger has taken a lot away from me. And the last anger issue I did have, it took, it was the worst thing one of the worst things, well, probably the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. I was talking to someone today and said that um, this certain incident is the worst thing that ever happened to me, and I truly believe that. But but when we face it, like I said, we learn from it. Anger becomes something else. It becomes fuel for change, fuel for peace, fuel for growth. That's what I'm doing. And remember, losing your temper isn't strength. The strength is staying calm when you have every single reason not to, you know? So I'm going to start closing this out. I think we got to the point, and I can't wait I want to leak the next episode out, but I'm not going to. I did last week. But remember, losing your temper, like I said, isn't strength. It's not strength. The real strength is staying calm. So, especially like I said, when there's no reason to, you just got to do it. So if you're sitting there right now, you know, if you're sitting in anger right now about your past, your pain, you know, of your people or whatever, remember this: you don't have to let it define you. Let it refine you. How's that? Don't let it define you. Let it refine you. Okay? It's worth noting, that you know anger often sits on top of deeper emotions, hurt, fear, shame, helplessness, as I said that earlier, recognizing, what's underneath, the anger, it helps us address the real issue, and, not just this, the surface reaction, anger leads, it leads to frustration, what's that lead to? Pride, you know, you don't have to win every fight. Sometimes I've learned this too. There would be, you know, with the only true love of my life, I would get into these, I would get into these discussions with her, and I always thought, if I knew I was right, and say I was, and something would come up, and something I had said to her, but I know I didn't say it the way she was saying. You said this, and I'm like, no, I didn't say that. Yeah, you did. So no, I know exactly what I said, and we'd go back and forth, and I would sit there and try to prove that this is what I actually said, and in the end, after the half an hour of it, instead of just letting it go, it was half the time it was senseless. It was like, what are we even, arguing about? It's not this argument's not even worth it. And I learned that over time, even if I was right, I learned that over time was be better off just saying, okay, I'm sorry, whatever, just apologize. And sometimes it's better to just do that. And even if you knew you were right, but it's not going anywhere, and it doesn't even mean anything. Even if you're right, it's not going to change anything. And then the argument goes away, just like that, and you never talk about it again. Humility is the cure, man. Every time we humble ourselves, man, we take anger's power right away, and that's what I've been starting to do with that. Like I said, Ephesians says, "Be angry, do not sin, do not let the sun go down." While you're still angry. My forever reminded me of that all the time. Don't go to bed angry. You never know. You never know when's the last time you're going to speak to somebody. Hey, I'll give you a quote too. Mark Twain. This is from Mark Twain. Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. Okay, so anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. That's from Mark Twain. It's kind of interesting. I found that online. I also wanted to reiterate the talk about the not talk about, but bring the comment back about the snake, that one podcast. I don't know if it was a podcast. I don't remember what it was. The guy was talking about the snake and the venom. I'm like, it's a pretty cool analogy, So just remember, try to let closing thoughts here. Try to let things go. Don't be angry at yourself. Stop beating yourself up. I was angry at myself for many, many years. I hated myself. I brought myself to tears, and just recently told somebody that I'm very, very close to. I love this person dearly, and I had tears in my eyes, crying when I was talking to her, and I said I hated myself, and for the first time, I'm actually, I finally am loving myself a little bit. I'm learning. I'm still learning to let things go. I really am. You can't change the past. But you can only, but you can change what you carry. So let that stuff go, man. Like I said, anger can destroy us. It can teach, it can, or it can teach us. It can harden your heart, or it can make you softer, wiser, more compassionate. It's not about being right. It's about being free. So anyway, this is our episode on anger. This has been Cracked Open with Glen Nunes. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast. Share it with somebody who may be struggling. Maybe you want to listen to it over and over a couple of times. I don't know if there's anything in here that could help you. Maybe someone that's in an anger issue with somebody. But just remember, this: your integrity is your legacy. Treat others as you want to be treated. Karma has no favorites. Stay true, stay kind, and keep walking forward with integrity, never backwards. The rear view mirror, even as life cracks us open. I was talking to him, I'll leave you with this. I was talking to my friend tonight, a guy that I call every day. And I said, we're talking about me in a certain relationship. And I said, in the future, I'm not even be talking about this, or it's going to be in the past, in the rearview mirror, and I'm going to be so more happy about it. It's not going to bother me like it's things that eat me up right now. I know in the future, if I let this stuff go, it's going to be in the rearview mirror. The analogy, you see the memes with the rearview mirror. That's why the rearview mirror is so small and the windshield so big. Look forward through the windshield. Don't look back. So until next time, take care of yourself. Take care of your heart, your peace, and your purpose. Okay? You have a great week. This is Glen Nunes with Cracked Open. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.